Kicked out at 15, a boy and his sister found a hidden cellar in a forgotten hillside. What they discovered inside didn't just give them a future, it forced them to choose what kind of people they were going to be. If you've ever felt like the world had given up on you, or if you've ever had to fight for your own second chance, then this story is for you. Stick around, and maybe even hints to build a home when you have nothing left. The key in my hand was cold, colder than the February air biting at my ears. It was a standard issue state key, brassy and worn, attached to a flimsy plastic tag with my name, Leo Vance, and a number that had been my entire identity for the last 3 years. Unit 7, Bed B. That number was officially expired. Today was my 18th birthday. It didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like an eviction. The group home's front door clicked shut behind me with a heavy, indifferent finality. I stood on the cracked concrete steps, holding a single black trash bag that contained everything I owned. 3 changes of clothes, a worn-out paperback, and a faded photo of my mom. The sky was the color of dishwater, low and oppressive, threatening a snow that couldn't quite commit. For a moment, I didn't move. I just listened to the silence. For 3 years, every second had been filled with noise. The TV blaring in the common room, the shouting matches down the hall, the quiet, desperate sobbing that sometimes leaked through the thin walls at night. Now, there was only the distant hum of traffic on the interstate and the rustle of dead leaves skittering across the frozen lawn. Freedom was supposed to feel big. It just felt empty. My sister Maya was still inside. She was 15. 3 more years left on her sentence. I'd said goodbye to her in the hallway, a clumsy, rushed hug under the watchful eye of Mr. Davies, the floor supervisor. Her eyes were wide, trying so hard to be brave for me. "You'll be okay, Leo," she'd whispered, her voice tight. "You'll figure it out." I wasn't so sure. I had $87 in my pocket, the sum total of my state-mandated savings from working odd jobs. I had a bus ticket to a city I'd never been to, and the name of a shelter that was probably already full. That was the plan. Survive. That was always the plan. I took a step, then another, the trash bag crinkling against my leg. My plan didn't last 10 minutes. My phone buzzed, a cheap burner I'd bought a week ago. The screen showed an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Probably a wrong number, or worse, someone from the home telling me I'd forgotten to sign a form. But something made me answer. "Leo Vance?" a woman's voice asked. It was crisp, professional, not unkind, but not warm either. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Sarah Albright. I'm an attorney with the state's Office of Public Guardianship. I was assigned to your grandmother's case, Eleanor Vance." I stopped walking. My grandmother. I barely remembered her. A vague image of a woman with flour on her hands, a garden full of strange-smelling herbs. We hadn't seen her since I was 10, a few years before my mom got really sick. My mom never wanted to talk about her. "My grandmother?" I said, my voice sounding hollow. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this over the phone, Leo, but she passed away 2 weeks ago." The world tilted slightly. A death I hadn't even known to prepare for. A person who was a ghost in my memory was now a real ghost. "Oh," was all I could manage. "I understand this is a lot to take in, especially today," Ms. Albright continued, her tone softening just a fraction. "The reason I'm calling is that you are her sole heir. You and your sister, Maya." I laughed, a short, bitter sound that turned into a cough in the cold air. "Heir? We don't—" She didn't have anything. We were told she lived in a trailer park. That's not entirely accurate, Ms. Albright said carefully. She owned a small property, a house and 5 acres of land in a town called Havenwood. According to her will, it passes to you and your sister jointly. But since you are now of legal age, you are the primary executor. A house. Land. The words didn't compute. They were concepts from a different universe, like luxury cars or summer vacations. People like me didn't inherit houses. There's a complication, Leo, she added, and I knew this was the other shoe, the one that always drops. Your grandmother fell behind on the property taxes for the last several years. The county has a lien on the property. You have 90 days to pay the delinquent amount, or they'll seize it and auction it off. Of course, there it was, a dream dangled for a second, then snatched away. How much? I asked, already knowing the answer didn't matter. $14,622. I leaned against a chain-link fence, the metal biting into my back through my thin jacket. $14,000. I might as well have needed 14 million. So it's gone, I said flatly. There's nothing I can do. Not necessarily, she said. I've been looking at the file. The property is isolated. The house is listed as being in extreme disrepair. It's unlikely to fetch much at auction, maybe just enough to cover the taxes. But the land itself might have some value down the line. A developer has made inquiries about a parcel nearby. She paused. Leo, I'm not supposed to give you advice, but your options are limited. You could walk away, or you could go there. You have 90 days of legal occupancy. 90 days to figure out if there's anything worth saving. It's not a shelter in the city, but it is a roof, technically. A roof. A broken roof on a ruined house in the middle of nowhere, saddled with a debt I could never pay. It was the worst offer I'd ever heard. It was the best offer I'd ever had. Where is it? I asked. 2 bus rides and a 12-mile taxi trip later, I understood what Ms. Albright meant by isolated. The taxi driver, a man with a kind, weathered face and a truck that smelled of coffee and sawdust, dropped me at the end of a dirt road that was more of a suggestion than a path. This is it, he said, pointing up a gentle slope. The old Vance place. Nobody's lived up there for years. He looked at me, at my trash bag and my thin jacket, and a flicker of pity crossed his face. He hesitated, then reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a small, foil-wrapped block. Here, he said, pushing it into my hand. My wife's banana bread. You look like you could use it. I mumbled a thank you, my throat too tight to say more. He just nodded and drove away, leaving me in a cloud of dust and an overwhelming silence. The property wasn't just in disrepair, it was being actively reclaimed by nature. The dirt road was choked with weeds, and young saplings grew defiantly in the middle of the track. As I walked, the woods on either side grew thicker, the trees crowding in, their bare branches like skeletal fingers against the white sky. Then I saw it. The house was a casualty of a long, slow war against gravity and weather. It was a small, one-story clapboard structure, but the paint had long since peeled away, leaving the wood a silvery, splintered gray. The porch roof sagged at a drunken angle, held up by one last stubborn post. A shutter hung from a single hinge, banging softly in the breeze. It was the saddest place I had ever seen. My heart sank. This was a mistake, a cruel joke. There was no roof here, not a safe one. I pushed open the front door, which groaned in protest. The air inside was thick and musty, the smell of damp, decay, and forgotten things. Dust motes danced in the weak light, filtering through grimy windows. The floor was littered with debris, fallen plaster, curled leaves that had blown in through a broken pane, and the desiccated bodies of insects. In the main room, a single armchair sat draped in a dusty white sheet, like a ghost waiting for company that would never arrive. A small cast-iron stove was rusted solid. The kitchen was worse. The linoleum was peeling up in brittle curls, and a fine layer of green mold coated the countertops. I opened a cupboard, and a mouse skittered out, making my heart jump. This wasn't a home. It was a tomb. I walked through the two small bedrooms, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The feeling of despair was so thick it was hard to breathe. Ms. Albright was wrong. There was nothing here to save. I was about to turn and leave, to walk the 12 miles back to town and try my luck with the bus station floor, when I saw it. On the wall in the back bedroom, next to a window that looked out onto the overgrown hillside behind the house, was a single, clean square. The wallpaper around it was faded and water-stained, but this one spot was brighter, as if a picture had hung there for years, protecting it from the light. There was a small nail still in the wall. It was nothing, but it was the only sign of deliberate care in the entire house. It was a sign that someone, my grandmother, had cherished something here. Curiosity, or maybe just a desperate need to find one thing that wasn't broken, made me go to the window. I looked out at the backyard. It was a chaotic mess of weeds and thorny bushes, sloping up into the dense woods. But as my eyes scanned the hillside, I saw something unnatural. It was a line. A straight horizontal line in the earth, almost perfectly concealed by overgrown grass and tangled vines. It was about 30 feet up the slope from the back of the house. It looked like the top of a door frame, buried in the dirt. My heart gave a strange little flutter. It was probably just an old retaining wall or a piece of forgotten junk, but it was something. I went back outside, the cold air a welcome shock after the stale atmosphere of the house. I circled around to the back and started climbing the slippery, leaf-strewn hill. As I got closer, I saw that it wasn't just one line. There were two massive, rusted metal plates, side by side, set almost flush into the hillside. They were cellar doors, storm doors. But they weren't attached to the house. They were just here, in the middle of the hill. A thick, rusted chain was looped through two heavy iron handles and secured with a massive, ancient-looking padlock. I knelt, my jeans soaking up the damp from the ground, and pulled at the tangle of vines covering them. The metal was cold and pitted. It looked like it hadn't been opened in a generation. Why would anyone build a root cellar this far from the house? Why lock it with a chain this thick? A new feeling began to push through the despair. It was a fragile, tentative thing, but it was there. Hope. I spent the next hour searching the dilapidated shed behind the house. It was a treasure trove of rust. Old tools, broken clay pots, bags of hardened cement. In a cobweb-filled corner, I found what I was looking for, a heavy-duty bolt cutter. It was old and stiff, but the jaws were still sharp. Carrying it back up the hill felt different. I had a purpose. The weight of the tool was reassuring. I positioned the jaws of the cutter around one of the thick chain links. I put all my weight into it, my arms shaking with the strain. The metal groaned. I squeezed harder, my knuckles white, my teeth clenched. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a sudden, shockingly loud crack that echoed across the silent property, the link snapped. The chain fell away with a clatter. I stood there, breathing heavily, my heart pounding. The doors were free. I grabbed one of the iron handles. It was heavy, far heavier than I expected. I braced my feet and pulled. It wouldn't budge. It was sealed shut by years of rust and settled earth. I tried again, grunting with effort, my boots slipping on the wet leaves. Nothing. Defeated, I slumped down. It was hopeless. Another dead end. As I sat there, my eyes fell on a long, sturdy-looking piece of scrap metal near the shed. A pry bar. Maybe. I scrambled back down, retrieved it, and wedged the tip into the seam between the two doors. I pushed down on the bar with all my body weight. The metal screeched in protest. A line of rust flaked away. I did it again, and again. Slowly, agonizingly, a gap began to open. It was just a sliver, but it was enough. I jammed the pry bar in deeper and heaved. With a deep, groaning shudder that seemed to come from the very bones of the hill, the door lifted a few inches. A puff of air escaped from the darkness within. It was cool and dry, and it smelled clean. Not like the rot in the house. It smelled of earth, stone, and something else. Something like ozone, or deep, undisturbed quiet. My excitement surged. I worked a pry bar back and forth, widening the gap until I could get my fingers underneath the edge of the door. I took a deep breath, braced myself, and lifted. The door swung upward with surprising ease, its well-oiled hinges finally overcoming the seal of time. It settled open with a soft thud, revealing a set of steep concrete steps leading down into absolute blackness. I peered in, but the darkness was total. I fumbled for my cheap burner phone and turned on its small, weak flashlight. I pointed the beam down the stairs. The light cut a narrow cone through the dark, revealing smooth, poured concrete walls. Not rough-hewn stone like an old root cellar. This was modern. Or at least, it was built to last. My hand was shaking, but I took the first step down, then the next. The air grew cooler with each step. At the bottom of the stairs was a heavy steel door, a fire door. It had a simple lever handle. This was no cellar. It was a bunker. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly, and pushed the lever down. The door swung inward without a sound. I stepped across the threshold, sweeping the thin beam of my phone's light across the space. And I froze. It was a single, large room, about 20 by 30 feet. The walls were smooth, sealed concrete, painted a clean, bright white. The floor was polished concrete as well. It was bone dry and immaculately clean. In the center of the room sat a sturdy wooden workbench. On the far wall, there were built-in wooden shelves, neatly organized. There were boxes of canned goods, jugs of water, first aid kits, blankets, and tools. Brand new tools, still in their packaging. A small generator sat in one corner, a fuel can beside it. In another corner was a simple cot, neatly made, and on the workbench, directly in the center, sat a single, small, wooden box. It was a simple, handcrafted thing, made of dark, polished cherry wood. It had a small brass latch. It was the only object in the entire room that looked personal, that looked old. It was waiting for me. I walked towards it slowly, my boots silent on the smooth floor. The space felt sacred, like a church. It was a place of intention, of immense effort. Someone had built this. Someone had stocked it. Someone had waited. I reached the workbench. The box was not locked. I lifted the small brass latch. The lid opened with a soft click. Inside, Nestled on a bed of faded velvet were three things: a stack of $100 bills bound with a simple rubber band, a small, tarnished silver key, and a thick, sealed envelope with a single word written on the front in a shaky, elegant script. Leo. My breath caught in my chest. This was it. This was the reason. I carefully lifted the envelope. It was heavy, full of pages. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely break the seal. I pulled out a sheaf of papers, covered in that same delicate handwriting. I sat down on the edge of the cot, the phone's light propped up against a can of beans, and I began to read. My dearest Leo, it began. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and the world has failed you in the way I always feared it would. I am sorry. I am so sorry for not being there. I need you to understand that it was never because I didn't love you. The words blurred. I had to stop and wipe my eyes. I hadn't cried when Ms. Albright told me she was gone. I was crying now. Your mother, my sweet, troubled daughter, made choices I couldn't understand. She was determined to make her own way, to prove she didn't need anyone. When she cut me out of her life and out of yours and Maya's, it broke my heart. I tried to reach out, but every letter was returned, every call went unanswered. I respected her wish, her boundary, but I never, ever stopped worrying. I knew she was struggling. I didn't know how badly. I started saving, just a little at a time, from my pension. I bought this little piece of land, this broken-down house nobody wanted, and I started to build. I hired a man from the next town over, a good man who kept his mouth shut, to help me with the digging and the concrete. The rest I did myself. Every weekend for 10 years. I hauled the materials in my old truck. I learned to wire, to seal, to build. This place, this room, is the physical shape of my love for you. It's the home I couldn't give you in person. I looked around the room, the clean walls, the stocked shelves. 10 years of weekends. 10 years of love poured into concrete and wood. The stack of cash was next to me. I picked it up and counted it. There was exactly $15,000, enough to pay the taxes with a few hundred to spare. The money should be enough to settle the debt with the county, the letter continued, as if she knew what I was thinking. It will give you a foothold, but it won't be easy. The house above is a ruin. I never had the money or the strength to fix it. I put all my energy, all my hope, down here. This cellar is your foundation. The silver key is for a safe deposit box at the bank in town. I don't know what you'll find in it. Old photos, maybe some jewelry, the remnants of a life. But Leo, there is something else you need to know. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. This land is not just dirt and trees. There is a deep, clean spring on the north end of the property. A water survey was done for the county years ago, and they tried to buy the land from me then. They said it was for a municipal well, but I found out the truth. A large bottling company wants the water rights. They have been buying up land all around here, quietly, through shell corporations. They will come for this land. They will offer you more money than you have ever dreamed of, enough to set you and Maya up for life, anywhere you want to go. Here it was, the choice. You could take their money, Leo. No one would blame you. After everything you've been through, you deserve an easy life. You could sell this place, this burden, and never look back. But I want to ask you to consider another option. This land, this water, it's clean, it's pure. It's one of the last places like it around here. The people in this town, They get their water from old wells that are starting to run dry. If the company gets this spring, they will drain it, bottle it, and sell it back to the world. And this town will be left with nothing. They will poison the watershed with their plastic and their runoff. Keeping this land means a life of struggle. It means fighting. It means being poor when you could be rich. It means protecting something that isn't just yours. I cannot make this choice for you. It has to be yours. It is the real inheritance. Not the land, not the money. The choice. Whatever you decide, know that I loved you. I saw you. And I believed in the man you would become. Your loving grandmother, Eleanor. I finished the letter and let the pages fall into my lap. I sat there in the silent, clean, white room, the smell of earth and stone all around me, and I wept. I cried for the grandmother I never got to know. I cried for the mother I had lost. I cried for my sister, trapped in a system that was grinding her down. I cried for the scared 15-year-old boy I had been, standing on a curb with a trash bag, and the scared 18-year-old I was now, holding a choice that felt heavier than the whole world. The weight of it was crushing. Sell. Take the money. Get Maya. Get a real apartment in a real city. Give her the life we never had. New clothes, good food, a school without metal detectors, security, safety. Wasn't that my only job? To protect her? Who cared about some spring, some town I didn't know? The world had never done a single thing for us. Why did we owe it anything? I could see the money. I could feel the relief. A clean break. A new start, with no history, no ghosts. But then I looked around the room again, at the neatly stacked cans, the carefully folded blankets, the workbench, sanded smooth by patient hands. 10 years of weekends, 10 years of pouring love into a hole in the ground, on the faint, desperate hope that it might one day shelter the grandchildren she wasn't allowed to see. Selling this place wouldn't just be selling land and water. It would be selling this. It would be selling her love, her sacrifice, her last desperate act of protection. It would be taking the one pure thing I had ever been given and putting a price tag on it. I felt sick. I stood up and paced the small room, my mind racing. I thought about Maya. What would she want? Not the money, not really. She wanted a home. She wanted a place where she felt safe, a place that was ours. She drew pictures constantly, pictures of houses with gardens and tire swings, never mansions, just homes. Could this be that? A ruined house and a concrete bunker on a hill? It was insane. It was impossible. The work would be immense, backbreaking. I had no skills, no experience. I'd have to fight a corporation. I'd probably fail. I'd be poor forever. And I'd be responsible for Maya. Truly responsible. Not just as a brother, but as a guardian. Could I do that? Could I convince the state to give me custody of my own sister? I sat back down on the cot, my head in my hands. The silence of the bunker was absolute. It was a perfect space for thinking. There were no distractions, no voices, no expectations. Just the truth of the concrete walls and the weight of the letter in my lap. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting. I wasn't just surviving from one moment to the next. I was being asked to make a conscious choice about the future, about my character. Who was I going to be? The man who took the easy way out, or the man who honored the gift he'd been given? I thought about that banana bread from the taxi driver. A small, simple act of kindness from a stranger. I thought about my grandmother, building this sanctuary in secret. I thought about Maya, drawing her little houses. These were the things that mattered, not the money, Not the escape, the connections, the care, the fight to create something good in a world that was mostly hard. My phone buzzed again, making me jump. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. "This is Albright. A notice of intent to seize was just posted on the property. The 90-day clock is officially ticking. They are not messing around. Also, a Mr. Peterson from Clearwater Development called my office asking about the Vance property's status. He said he'd be in Havenwood next week and wanted to discuss options with the new owner. Be ready, Leo." Clearwater Development, the bottling company. They were already moving in. The pressure was on. Suddenly, the choice didn't feel like a philosophical exercise anymore. It felt like a battle line being drawn. I took a deep breath. The air in the bunker was still and cool. It felt solid, grounded. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I walked the 12 miles back to town. The sky was still gray, but it felt different. It felt like a canvas, not a ceiling. The town of Havenwood was small, a single main street with a handful of storefronts, a diner, a hardware store, a post office, and a small community bank. It looked tired, but not defeated. I went to the bank first. The teller looked at me with suspicion, my worn clothes and dirty jeans marking me as an outsider. I presented the silver key and my ID. After a long wait and a hushed conversation with the manager, I was led into the vault. The safe deposit box was small. Inside, there was a thin gold chain with a tiny locket, a stack of old, sepia-toned photographs of people I didn't recognize, and my mother's birth certificate. And underneath it all was the deed to the property, free and clear, in Eleanor Vance's name. Holding it felt real. It felt heavy. Next, I went to the county tax office, a sterile room in the back of the town hall. The clerk was a stern-faced woman who looked at me over the top of her glasses, as if I were a piece of gum she'd stepped in. I placed the stack of $15,000 on the counter. "I'm here to pay the back taxes on the Vance property," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She blinked, her composure cracking for just a second. She counted the money 3 times. She stamped my receipt with a satisfying thud. "The lien is removed," she said, her voice flat, unable to hide a hint of grudging respect. "The property is yours." Walking out of that office, I felt 10 feet tall. I had done it. The first step. The land was safe, for now. But the bigger fight was just beginning. I used the last of my original $87 to buy a coffee at the diner and use their phone. I called Ms. Albright. "I paid them," I said, before she could even say hello. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. "You what?" "Leo, how?" "My grandmother left some cash. It was hidden on the property." I see," she said, her professional tone completely gone, replaced by genuine astonishment. "Well, that changes things." "I want to keep it," I said, the words coming out in a rush. "I want to keep the land, and I want to get my sister. I want to be her guardian." Another silence. This one was longer. I could hear her breathing, thinking. "Leo, that is a very, very difficult path," she said slowly. "To get custody, you'll have to prove you can provide a stable home, a source of income. The state will not place her in a house that's uninhabitable. You'll have inspections, interviews, psychological evaluations. They will fight you." "I know," I said, "but this is our home. I can fix it. I can make it work. Will you help me?" I heard her sigh. It wasn't a sigh of exasperation. It was a sigh of someone who had seen too much, hoped for too little, and was suddenly being confronted with a spark of impossible defiance. "The first step," she said, her voice now firm, all business again, "is to establish residency and income. You need a job, and you need to start documenting every single thing you do to make that house habitable. Take pictures, keep receipts, create a paper trail. I'll start filing the preliminary paperwork for the guardianship petition. But Leo, don't expect any miracles. This could take a year or more." A year? Maya had to stay in that place for another year. The thought was like a punch to the gut. But it didn't break me. It hardened my resolve. "Okay," I said. "A year. What do I do about the developer?" "Mr. Peterson? Stall him. Don't agree to anything. Don't sign anything. Just listen. Find out what they want and what they're willing to pay. Information is your only weapon right now. I have to go. Good luck, Leo, and well done." I hung up the phone. A year. I had a year to turn a ruin into a home, to find a job in a town where I knew no one, and to prepare for a fight with a corporation. I looked at the few $100s left from my grandmother's money. It wasn't much. It had to be enough. I went to the hardware store. I bought a heavy-duty tarp, a new hammer, nails, a hand saw, and a book titled Basic Home Repair for Beginners. The owner, a man named George with flour-dusted hands that reminded me of my vague memory of Eleanor, gave me a long, curious look. "Fixing up the old Vance place?" he asked. "Trying to," I said. He nodded slowly. "Your grandmother was a good woman. Stubborn as a mule, but good. She bought a lot of concrete from me over the years. Never said what for." He rang up my supplies. "If you need to know how to do something, you come ask. I'd rather you ask than buy the wrong thing twice." It was a small offer, but it felt huge. It was the first crack of light in the wall of my isolation. The work was the hardest thing I had ever done. I started with the roof. I spent days up there, patching holes with pieces of scrap tin and covering the whole thing with the giant tarp, nailing it down against the wind. It was ugly, but it was watertight. Then I moved inside. I tore out the moldy drywall and the peeling linoleum. I scrubbed the floors and walls with bleach until my hands were raw. Every evening, I would retreat to the clean, quiet sanctuary of the bunker. It was my base of operations, my refuge. I would eat a simple meal of canned beans or soup, read a chapter of my repair manual by the light of a battery-powered lantern, and fall asleep on the cot, exhausted but satisfied. The physical labor was grounding. With every swing of the hammer, with every board I tore out, I felt like I was clearing away not just the rot in the house, but the rot in my own soul, the hopelessness, the fear, the feeling of being disposable. I was building something. I was choosing to build something. A week later, a sleek black SUV crawled up my dirt road. A man in an expensive suit and shiny shoes got out. He looked at the dilapidated house, at me in my dirt-stained clothes, and smiled a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Leo Vance," he said, extending a hand. "Mark Peterson, Clearwater Development. I believe my office contacted your lawyer." I didn't take his hand. "I know who you are," I said. He wasn't fazed. "Look, I'll be direct. This property is a wreck, a liability. You've got a tax bill that would choke a horse, and a house that's one stiff breeze from falling down. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer. We'll take this whole problem off your hands. $500,000. Cash." He said the number like it was a magic spell. $500,000. It was an astronomical sum. It was life-changing. It was the easy way out, gift-wrapped and tied with a bow. For a dizzying second, I saw it all again. The apartment, the new life, Maya happy and safe. But then I thought of the letter. I thought of the 10 years of weekends. I thought of the spring. "The land's not for sale," I said. Peterson's smile tightened. "Son, let's be realistic. What are you going to do here? Camp out? This isn't a movie. This is the real world. That money is more than you'll ever see in your lifetime. Take the win." I said it's not for sale. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes cold and assessing. He was recalculating. He saw I wasn't the dumb kid he thought I was. "All right," he said, his tone shifting. "Let me be even more direct. We have ways of acquiring property. We can petition the county to declare it a blight. We can challenge the survey lines. We can make your life very, very difficult. Or you can take the $500,000 and walk away a rich man. Think about it." He got back in his car and drove away, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and unspoken threats hanging in the air. The fight had begun. I needed a job. I walked back into town and started asking. The diner wasn't hiring. The post office was federal. Finally, I went back to the hardware store. George was behind the counter, organizing screws into little plastic bins. "You again," he said, not looking up. "I need a job," I said. "Anything. I'll sweep floors, stock shelves, load trucks. I work hard." He stopped what he was doing and looked at me. He looked at my hands, which were calloused and scraped from the work on the house. "You know anything about tools?" he asked. "I'm learning," I said, holding up my repair manual. He grunted. It might have been a laugh. "Show up tomorrow at 7. Don't be late. I'll pay you minimum wage, under the table for now. We'll see how you do." It wasn't much, but it was an income. It was another piece of the puzzle. The days fell into a rhythm. I'd wake up before dawn, work on the house for 2 hours, then walk to the hardware store. I'd work a full day, learning from George, listening to the local contractors who came in, absorbing every bit of information I could. In the evenings, I'd walk home, work on the house until it was too dark to see, and then collapse in the bunker. I spoke to Maya once a week. The calls were my lifeline. I told her about the house, about the bunker, about my job. I tried to sound confident, hopeful. "It's going to be our home, May," I told her. "I'm going to get you out. I promise." "I know you will, Leo," she'd say, her voice small but full of a faith in me that I didn't feel myself. "Just hurry." Winter turned to spring. The snow melted, revealing the green shoots of new life. I had replaced the windows in the house. I had put down a new subfloor. With George's guidance, I learned how to run basic plumbing. I used the money from my job to buy a used water pump and hooked it up to the old well near the house. The first time I turned on the faucet in the kitchen sink and clean, cold water gushed out, I felt a surge of triumph that was better than any amount of money. The house was still a shell, but it was a functional shell. It had a solid roof, secure windows, and running water. It was becoming a home. Meanwhile, the pressure from Clearwater continued. They sent lawyers' letters. They filed a formal complaint with the county about the unsafe structure on my property. Ms. Albright handled it all, a calm, steady presence on the other end of the phone. "They're trying to bleed you dry, Leo," she warned, "legally and financially. Just keep your head down and keep building your case." One Saturday, I decided to find the spring my grandmother had written about. I followed the rough directions in her letter, hiking to the northern edge of the property. I found it in a small, mossy clearing, surrounded by old-growth ferns. It wasn't a dramatic gusher. It was a quiet, constant upwelling of water from a fissure in the rock, so clear it was almost invisible. It trickled down to form a small, pristine creek that wound its way through the woods. I knelt and cupped my hands, drinking directly from the source. The water was icy cold and tasted cleaner and purer than anything I'd ever known. This was what they wanted to buy. This was what they wanted to drain and put in plastic bottles. Kneeling there, in that quiet, sacred-feeling place, I knew I had made the right choice. My resolve hardened from hope into steel. The summer was long and hot. I spent my evenings and weekends working not just on the house, but in the bunker. It was my real sanctuary. I cleaned and organized it, turning it from a simple shelter into a livable space. I built a small desk from scrap wood. I ran a heavy-duty extension cord from the generator, giving myself reliable light and power. It became more than just a place to sleep. It was my office, my library, my think tank. It was the heart of the entire operation. It was where I planned my next steps for the house, and where I prepared for the custody battle for Maya. Finally, after nearly a year of work, the day of the home inspection came. A stern-faced social worker named Mrs. Gable arrived, her clipboard held like a weapon. I walked her through the house. I showed her the new roof, the new windows, the working plumbing, the clean, safe rooms. I showed her the small vegetable garden I had started out back. The house was simple, rustic, and far from finished. There was no drywall yet, just exposed studs and insulation. But it was clean, dry, and secure. It was a safe environment. She made notes, her face unreadable. "And where do you live?" she asked. "You can't possibly be living in here while you work." "I have a separate living quarters on the property," I said, leading her up the hill to the cellar doors. Her eyebrows shot up when she saw them. When I opened the doors and led her down the concrete steps into the bright, clean bunker, her jaw literally dropped. She walked around the room, touching the smooth walls, looking at the stocked shelves, the neat cot, the small workspace. "You built this?" she asked, her voice full of disbelief. "My grandmother did," I said. "I just made it my own." She was silent for a long time. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. I think she finally saw past the file, past the scared kid from the group home. She saw a young man who had fought, tooth and nail, to build a life from nothing. "I will submit my report," was all she said. 2 weeks later, Ms. Albright called. "They approved it, Leo," she said, and for the first time, I heard pure, unadulterated joy in her voice. "The judge signed the order this morning. You have full legal guardianship of Maya. You can go get her." The drive to the group home was a blur. I had borrowed George's old pickup truck. When I walked through those familiar, hated doors, it was as a different person. I wasn't a resident anymore. I was a guardian. I was a rescuer. Maya was waiting in the lobby, holding a single trash bag, just like I had a year before. When she saw me, her face broke into the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. We didn't say anything. We just hugged, right there in the middle of the floor, for a long, long time. The journey home was quiet. Maya looked out the window, watching the city give way to suburbs, then to farmland, then to the woods of Havenwood. When we pulled up the dirt road to our house, she grew silent. I saw the doubt in her eyes as she looked at the still unfinished house. "It's not much yet, May," I said softly, "but it's ours." "It's perfect," she whispered. But I had one more thing to show her. I led her up the hill and opened the cellar doors. Her eyes went wide as we walked down the steps. When she stepped into the clean white room, she just stood in the middle, turning in a slow circle. She ran her hand along the workbench. She looked at the cot that would be hers. She looked at the space, the safety, the love that had been poured into it. And then she looked at me. "A cellar," she said, her voice full of wonder. "You found us a home in a cellar." That first year with Maya was both the hardest and the best of my life. We worked on the house together. She was a natural, with a keen eye for detail and a steady hand. She painted the walls, planted flowers in the garden, and slowly, room by room, we turned the ruin into a real home. The bunker remained our heart. Maya turned one corner of it into her art studio. Her drawings, once full of sad, lonely houses, now depicted our house, our land, our spring. They were full of life and color. I started a small business out of the other side of the bunker, a handyman and repair service for the people in town. George sent customers my way. My reputation for being honest and hard-working grew. It wasn't much money, but it was enough. We were poor, but we were free. Clearwater Development didn't give up, but their attacks became less effective. With a real home, a stable income, and a place in the community, I was no longer an easy target. Ms. Albright helped me file a conservation easement on the spring, protecting it legally. The fight isn't over. It probably never will be. But now, we fight from a place of strength. We fight from home. Sometimes, late at night, I go down to the bunker by myself. I sit at the workbench my grandmother built, and I read her letter again. The real inheritance wasn't the land or the money. It was the choice. She gave me the chance to choose the harder right over the easier wrong. She gave me a chance to become the man she believed I could be. And in doing so, she gave me back not just my future, but my past. She gave me a history to be proud of, a legacy of love and defiance to build upon. Home isn't just four walls and a roof. It's a foundation. It's a place where you are safe enough to become who you are meant to be. For me and Maya, that place was a hidden cellar in a hillside, a hole in the ground filled with a grandmother's love. And it saved us. It truly did. This story, our story, is about finding light in the darkest of places. It's about understanding that the most valuable things we can inherit are not things at all, but choices and chances. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. There are so many of us out there who have had to build our own safety, our own homes, from the ground up. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for your own patch of ground, more than that, I want to hear from you. Leave and tell me about a time you had to make a hard choice to build something better for yourself or your family. What does home mean to you? I read our stories. You are not alone in your struggle. In this community, we find strength in knowing that we are all just trying to build our own safe place